The balloons sagged slightly in the humid afternoon air, their faded colors clashing with the empty chairs arranged around the table. A half-melted cake sat in the center, untouched, the candles standing stiffly like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. At the head of the table sat Emily, a frail young girl in her wheelchair, her eyes fixed on the candles that no one else had come to light. It was her 12th birthday, a day that was supposed to be filled with laughter, friends, and celebration. But instead, Emily found herself alone, her only company the silence of a backyard that should have been echoing with joy. Her mother, Rachel, hovered inside the kitchen, glancing out the window every few minutes, her heart aching at the sight of her daughter waiting for friends who never showed up. But what neither Emily nor her mother knew was that this heartbreaking moment would set into motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. A single stranger, someone they had never met before, would walk into their story and ask one simple question. And that question would rewrite everything Emily believed about herself, her future, and her place in the world. Before we dive in, let me ask you, what would you do if you saw a child sitting alone at her own birthday party, surrounded by empty chairs? Would you keep walking, or would you stop and say something? As you hear Emily's story, you might just find yourself answering that question in ways you never imagined. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because Emily's journey is not just about heartbreak. It's about the power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and how even the smallest gestures can change everything. And if you've ever felt overlooked or forgotten, this story will remind you that you are never truly alone. So make sure you subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell, because stories like Emily's are ones you don't want to miss. The silence in the Evans household was the kind that pressed heavily against the walls, as if it had weight of its own. Emily's mother, Grace, would often find herself standing at the doorway to her daughter's room, watching her stare quietly out the window. Emily had been paralyzed from the waist down for nearly 3 years now, after a tragic accident that turned her world upside down. Once an active, lively child who ran across playgrounds, raced her brother up the stairs, and danced in the living room to her favorite songs, she now sat in her wheelchair, a prisoner of memories her body could no longer keep up with. School had become a battlefield. Not because of the academics. Emily was a bright student who still devoured books and solved math problems with ease. But because of the stares, the whispers, and the way her friends seemed to drift away as the months stretched into years. Children who once shared birthday cake with her stopped calling. Invitations to playdates dried up. Even teachers, though kind in words, sometimes treated her differently, as though her chair defined her ability to participate. But the hardest blow of all came on the day of her 12th birthday. Grace had tried to make it special. She decorated the dining room with pastel balloons, set a cake in the center of the table, and prepared Emily's favorite spaghetti with meatballs. She even sent out invitations to Emily's classmates, hopeful that maybe this year would be different, that maybe they would show up. But as the candles were lit and Emily sat at the head of the table in her wheelchair, wearing the soft lavender dress her mother had picked out, the seats around her remained empty. The cake flickered in front of her, its light casting shadows over an otherwise vacant table. Her older brother, Michael, who was 15, hovered near the doorway, unsure of how to comfort her. He wanted to tell her that she didn't need anyone else, that their family was enough. But the sight of his sister, sitting at that long table with tears forming in her eyes, broke him in ways he couldn't explain. Grace tried to keep her voice cheerful as she said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart," and clapped her hands. But her throat tightened as she looked at her daughter, realizing that no amount of decorations or food could fill the loneliness. Emily closed her eyes and made her wish before blowing out the candles. And though she never spoke it aloud, everyone in that room could feel what she was wishing for. Just one real friend, someone who would see her for who she was, not for the chair she sat in. That night, as the balloons drooped and the cake sat mostly untouched, Grace wept quietly in her room. She had prayed, pleaded, and worked tirelessly to give her daughter as normal a childhood as possible. But despite all her love, she couldn't shield Emily from the cruelty of being left behind. And for Emily, the loneliness became heavier. Birthdays were supposed to be a celebration of life, but for her, they had become painful reminders of everything she had lost, and everyone who had drifted away. But what neither Emily nor Grace knew was that life was about to shift. And sometimes, it only takes a single stranger, a single question, to breathe hope back into a heart that had nearly stopped believing. The silence of that birthday afternoon weighed heavily in the house. Emily sat in front of the cake, the candles burning lower, the wax dripping slowly onto the frosting. She didn't feel like eating. She was about to blow them out alone, forcing herself to believe her whispered wish mattered, when a gentle knock at the front door startled her. Her mother went to answer it. Standing there was a neighbor, a woman named Mrs. Carter, who had just moved into the neighborhood a few months earlier. She carried a small bag of groceries, her warm smile framed by lines of kindness etched from years of living. She hadn't known Emily well yet, just casual greetings when she passed by their house, but something had drawn her to stop by that day. Mrs. Carter stepped inside, her eyes immediately catching sight of Emily sitting by the table, a single cake before her, and no one else around. There was something about the image that stopped her in her tracks, something so heartbreaking and raw. She walked over, and instead of saying the typical, "Happy birthday," she paused. She leaned down, her voice soft but steady, and asked a question Emily never expected. "Emily," she said gently, "what would make this day special for you?" It was such a simple question. But for Emily, it was everything. Her throat tightened. She hadn't been asked that in years. People always assumed they knew what she wanted, or worse, avoided asking altogether. Her friends, her teachers, even her relatives. No one seemed to think her desires mattered anymore. But here was this woman, a stranger really, looking into her eyes as if she truly cared. Emily blinked back tears. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she answered, I just wish I didn't have to celebrate alone." The words hung in the air, trembling, as though they carried the full weight of her pain. Mrs. Carter didn't hesitate. She placed her groceries down on the counter, rolled up her sleeves, and smiled. "Well then," she said, "I guess we'll just have to fix that, won't we?" In that moment, something stirred inside Emily, a flicker of hope she thought she'd lost. She wasn't sure what this woman could possibly do, but the sincerity in her voice, the kindness in her eyes, told Emily that maybe, just maybe, this birthday wouldn't end the way it started. And so, with one question, a door that had long been closed inside Emily's heart cracked open. She didn't know yet that this was only the beginning, and that Mrs. Carter's decision that day would change her life forever. Mrs. Carter didn't waste a second. She clapped her hands together and said with cheerful determination, "All right, Emily, let's make this birthday one to remember." Emily's mother, still standing by the door, looked both surprised and relieved. It had been a long time since she'd seen anyone step into their home with such warmth. She quickly joined in, pulling extra chairs from the living room and helping Mrs. Carter set the table with plates and cups. But Mrs. Carter had more in mind than just sitting down for cake. She walked outside, knocked on two neighbors' doors, and explained quickly, "It's Emily's birthday, and she's celebrating alone. Would you come help make it special?" At first, Emily sat in disbelief. No one ever went out of their way for her like this. She didn't expect anyone to show up. She had grown used to people finding excuses to stay away, afraid of the wheelchair, afraid of the uncomfortable silence her condition sometimes brought. But then, within minutes, the front door opened again. A young family from across the street came in, carrying their little boy who clutched a brightly wrapped toy. Behind them came another neighbor, an elderly man with shaky hands but a wide smile. One by one, people began to gather in Emily's living room. What had started as a lonely afternoon slowly transformed into a celebration. Emily watched in awe as balloons were brought out, music was turned on from someone's phone, and laughter filled the house. The once quiet room now buzzed with life. She sat at the center of it all, her wheelchair no longer a symbol of isolation, but the very reason this unexpected community had come together. When the candles were lit again, Mrs. Carter stood by Emily's side and whispered, "Go ahead, sweetheart. Make a new wish. This time, you're not alone." Emily closed her eyes, her heart racing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt celebrated. And when she blew out the candles, she wished, not for her legs to work, not for a miracle cure, but simply for moments like this, moments where she belonged. The room erupted in cheers, clapping, and voices singing happy birthday louder than she'd ever heard before. Tears slid down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from sadness, they were from joy. From that day on, something shifted. Mrs. Carter didn't just stop at that birthday party. She began visiting Emily regularly, helping her with schoolwork, bringing her books, even teaching her how to bake cookies from her kitchen table. Slowly, other neighbors followed her lead, dropping by with food, games, or just a smile. Emily's world, once so small and confined to the corners of her room, began to open up. She started writing in her journal again, sketching out stories she'd long abandoned. She felt lighter, brighter, as though she had been pulled from the shadows into the light of something far greater than herself. What Mrs. Carter started was no longer just about a birthday. It was about giving Emily her place back in the world. And Emily, though she didn't know it yet, was about to become the heart of a community movement that stretched far beyond her little house. Life has a way of testing the very things we begin to treasure most. For Emily, just when it seemed her world was finally filling with laughter, friendship, and hope, another storm began to brew. It started with her health. One cold morning, Emily woke up struggling to breathe. Her chest felt heavy, her body weak. At first, her mother thought it was just a seasonal flu. But within days, Emily was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia. For a girl already battling paralysis, this sickness hit her harder than anyone expected. The doctors warned her mother that Emily's body might not recover as quickly. Her immune system is fragile, they said gently. We'll do everything we can, but it's going to be a fight. Back in the sterile hospital room, the walls felt emptier than the decorated birthday table she had only recently enjoyed. Emily lay hooked up to machines, her small frame hidden under white sheets. The laughter of neighbors, the warmth of Mrs. Carter's hugs, all of it felt like a dream slipping away. One night, as rain tapped softly against the window, Emily whispered to her mother, "Maybe this is it. Maybe the world only gave me a taste of happiness to take it back." Her voice cracked as tears rolled down her cheeks. Her mother held her hand tightly, fighting her own tears. "No, Emily, you don't give up. Not after how far you've come. You are stronger than you know." But deep inside, Emily was terrified. What if she never got to sit at that birthday table again? What if her story ended here, in a hospital bed, unseen and forgotten once more? For days, she drifted between sleep and waking, too weak to smile, too tired to speak. The hospital became her new prison. And yet, just when things felt the darkest, something remarkable happened. One by one, the same neighbors who had filled her home weeks before started showing up at the hospital. Mrs. Carter came with flowers. The young boy who had brought her a toy on her birthday now brought a handmade card that read, "We miss you, Emily." The elderly neighbor shuffled in with a bag of oranges and whispered, "You're not alone, little one." The hospital room slowly transformed into a second party space. Pictures, balloons, and even a little banner that read, "Get well soon, Emily," hung above her bed. Nurses passing by would stop and smile, saying, "You've got quite the fan club." But even with all the love around her, Emily's battle was far from over. The pneumonia dragged on, and nights were the hardest. The machines beeped, the air smelled of antiseptic, and sometimes, despite everyone's efforts, Emily still felt like she was slipping. Her hope, once so bright, was flickering. She was about to learn that even the strongest light faces shadows, and that sometimes it takes losing hope to discover a deeper kind of strength. The days in the hospital were long, but slowly, Emily's body began to respond. Her fever broke. Her breathing grew stronger. And one morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital window, warm and golden, as Emily opened her eyes with a faint smile. She was alive. She was healing. The doctors called it remarkable. Her mother called it a miracle. But Emily called it something else. Love. The love of a stranger who once asked a simple question at a lonely birthday table. The love of neighbors who had once walked past in silence but now stood by her side in unity. And the unshakable love of her mother, who never let her give up. When Emily was finally discharged, the neighborhood threw another celebration. Not just for her recovery, but for her courage. The small street that once seemed indifferent now glowed with banners, music, and laughter. Children played, neighbors hugged, and Emily, though still paralyzed, was lifted into her wheelchair and placed at the center of it all. This time, she wasn't sitting alone. She was surrounded. And as the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emily whispered to her mother, "I used to think my wheelchair meant I was stuck. But now I see it's just a part of my story. And my story isn't over. It's only beginning. Her mother kissed her forehead. That's right, sweetheart. Your story will keep inspiring more people than you'll ever know. And indeed, it did. Emily's life became a reminder that kindness can rewrite loneliness, that hope can rise even in the darkest hours, and that sometimes, all it takes to change everything is a single question. If Emily's story touched your heart today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need hope right now. And before you go, I want to hear from you. What's the smallest act of kindness you've ever received that made the biggest difference in your life? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if you believe more people should experience stories like Emily's, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because we're just getting started. Together, we can build a community where no one ever feels alone again. Because remember, sometimes the smallest gesture has the power to change everything.